Started. Let's do a roll call.
Fredson.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
I'm here. Yep.
Sterner.
Aye, here.
Vento. Zirin. Sorry if I say that wrong.
Zirin is present.
Thank you. Lindstrom.
That's me.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now's the time for me to read the executive order. Governor Walz has declared a peacetime emergency in response to COVID-19, and the Met Council chair has determined it is not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person meeting for reasons stated in the governor's emergency executive order. Accordingly, committee members will participate in this meeting via telephone or other electronic means, and the meeting will be conducted under Minnesota statutes section 13D.021. And if anybody's out there that has any comments, we encourage members of the public to email us at public.info@met.state.mn.us, and we will respond accordingly. So with that, if there's no changes, we can move forward with this afternoon's agenda. First item or next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from May 11th. If there's no changes to those minutes, can we get a motion of approval?
This is Sterner. I'd motion to approve the minutes.
And a second?
It's Fredson. I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Fredson.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zirin.
Zirin's an aye.
Zirin, sorry. Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. No items on our consent agenda. However, we do have several items on our non-consent agenda. First one is 2021-135 wastewater treatment plant solids processing contingency. And Mr. Ward, welcome back.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Joe Ward, and I'm here today to talk to you about a contract for wastewater treatment plant solids processing contingency. A little bit of a mouthful. Next slide, please. So this contract covers 3 plants, Metro, Blue Lake, and Empire. And we'll start with Metro here. And when Metro's incinerators are down, sometimes it becomes necessary for the dewatered sludge to be loaded out. And this oftentimes happens with planned maintenance shutdowns. Sometimes it's unplanned, but most of the time planned maintenance shutdowns. And then the pH of the dewatered sludge is raised to a 12 using the lime kiln dust that actually we discussed a few weeks ago. We had a separate contract for that. So next slide, please. Oh, and I should say that photo there, I'm sorry, was of the mixing unit at Metro where the mixture happens and then it falls below into a truck and is disposed of at a landfill. So next slide, please. In this photo here, we're just showing the centrifuges at Blue Lake. So at Blue Lake, the sludge is dewatered, and should the pellet fertilizer facility on the just downstream of the dewatered sludge ever go down, we would need to load out the dewatered sludge and dispose of that at a landfill as well. This is sort of a renewal of an existing contract that we've had in place. And at Blue Lake, it's never actually been used before, but it's a good contingency to have. And for landfill disposal, it meets requirements simply by the anaerobic digestion process ahead of it. However, there would need to be a little bit of testing to confirm that it's okay. So next slide, please. At Empire, we normally dispose of our dewatered sludge by land application. However, I believe once in the past 5 years, the conditions weren't right, and the sludge did need to be disposed of at a landfill. So that's I guess how it works at Empire. And in this case, the dewatered sludge meets the landfill disposal requirements simply by the anaerobic digestion that happens prior to landfill, or prior to land application, excuse me. Next slide, please. So we completed an invitation for bids. We advertised March 24th, had a bid opening on April 27th, and received 2 bids. The low responsive bid was from SKB. Next slide, please. We're looking at a 2-year contract with 2-year fixed price contract with 3 optional 1-year extensions, a total award not to exceed $3.4 million. The Metropolitan Council underutilized business goal of 4% for disadvantaged business enterprise participation was set. And SKB's bid actually includes a 22.5% disadvantaged business enterprise participation. Next slide, please. And so with that, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council, that the Metropolitan Council authorizes its regional administrator to award and execute a contract to SKB Environmental for contingency and transport and disposal of dewatered sludge for a total award not to exceed $3.4 million. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ward?
Chair Lindstrom, this is Raymond Zirin.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, that's a lofty DVE goal, and our supplier here in this case is able to meet that. Can we bring any insight on how they're able to do that with that goal? Because there's other parts of our business that aren't able to do that. Could you give us some insight on that? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, committee members. So just to be clear, I believe the goal was 4% and the participation was 22.5%. And my understanding in talking with the SKB is that they were able to take the trucking component of the contract and set that aside for a DBE firm. Sort of like they took a chunk of it. That was as opposed to trying to break up a component of the work or carve out just a portion of it and keeping a larger portion for themselves. It just sort of worked out that they were able to sub out a certain set of work. Does that make sense?
It certainly does make sense, and that's actually what I was expecting you to say.
Oh.
I want to let the committee know that Lisa and I received an email from Susan Vento, Councilmember Vento, saying that she is present and having some technology challenges logging into WebEx, and is observing the committee meeting via YouTube. And so she says, please record me as present and voting yes. So question for Lori or anyone really, is there a way for Councilmember Vento to call in to the committee meeting?
I've never encountered this before, so I can give her my cell phone number if she wants to just call me and hang out online, and then I can hear her and acknowledge that. Would that work?
That might work unless, is there anybody out there that has any other suggestions?
So Jason, looks like she was able to connect. I see her on the
Oh, there
participant
she
list.
is.
Right in the nick of time.
Oh, can she access the chat? Let's see. Yep. I just sent her and asking if she can reply.
Very good. Thanks, both of you. And we can keep trucking right along to our next item, where we're talking HVAC, piping, mechanical, and sheet metal services amendment contract. Mr.
It's-
Tierney.
Yep. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members and other council employees. I'm here to talk today. Again, my name is John Tierney, Mechanical Maintenance Manager for MCES. I'm here to look at an amendment for our previous contract 15P 114. The background is this contract provides HVAC, piping, mechanical, and sheet metal services for all of MCS locations. The council wastewater treatment plants and the regional maintenance facilities have numerous HVAC systems that must be maintained for proper operation, for creature comfort, process efficiencies, and avoidance of permit violations. We received 8 bids back on December 22nd, 2020. The bids range from $328,927 to $407,539. The Metropolitan Council underutilized business goal, the MCUB goal for this contract was 8%. 7 of the 8 lowest bids were determined to be non-responsive. There was one sole responsible bidder, but that bidder was 24% higher than the lowest bid. The Environmental Committee approved rejection of all bids at their April 27th, 2021 meeting. And then the Metropolitan Council authorized at May 12th, 2021, that meeting, they authorized it. MCS is requesting to extend the existing contract so that details can be worked out for a revised scope of work and to allow adequate time for the rebid process. So the proposed action that the Metropolitan Council the Metropolitan Council authorizes its regional administrator to execute a contract amendment with Yule Company for an amount not to exceed $100,000 for an additional HVAC, piping, mechanical, sheet metal services for all MCS locations. And that contract was 15P 114. So the contract that we've had in place for the last 5 years, we'd like to extend that so that we can work out how we're going to meet the MCUB goals and objectives, working with procurement and OEO. So that's why I'm here today. The rationale is the amendment of this mechanical pipe fitting services contract exceeds the 10%, which requires council approval. The Thrive Lens analysis is this action furthers the Thrive outcomes of stewardship, prosperity, and equity by MCS Maintenance Business Unit partnering and working with procurement and OEO to develop a plan and scope of work for our bidding contractors to be successful in the bid process. This creates regional economic competitiveness, thereby attracting and retaining successful businesses from our neighboring communities. So on the funding for this contract amendment would be funded by the annual operating budgets for each of the MCS locations. And there's no known opposition.
Thank you. And Councilmember Vento, welcome. You got your technology. It's all pointing in the right direction. Great. And Councilmember Fredson pointed out that we actually didn't vote on the first agenda item. So we'll vote on this one and then take a second look at that first agenda item. So is there a motion to move forward with the staff recommendation?
This is Fredson. I'll move the staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
I heard a second from Councilmember Zirin. Roll call, please.
Fredson,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Zirin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then let's jump back to the first agenda item. Good catch, Councilmember Fredson, on that we didn't actually vote on that. And so this is the wastewater treatment plant solids processing contingency. Could I get a motion to approve the staff recommendation for that item?
Fredson, I would move the staff recommendation.
A second?
Bento seconds.
Thank you. Roll call on this one.
Fredson,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Zirin,
Aye.
Zirin's aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Our third item is a council mechanical pipe fitting services amendment contract.
So,
Mr. Tierney again. Hello, hello.
yep, how you doing, Mr. Chair, committee members? Same thing as the previous contract. This is Metropolitan Council Mechanical Pipe Fitting Services Amendment for the contract 15P113. So the background with this is this contract provides a mechanical pipe fitting services for all MCS locations. The council wastewater treatment plants and regional maintenance facilities have numerous piping systems that convey many types of liquids, steam, air, which includes pressure vessels and other equipment that requires special licensure for repairs. These systems and equipment must be maintained, repaired, replaced as needed for proper operation, safety, and environmental protection. We received 4 bids in the original bid opening on December 22nd, 2020 for a new contract, which was 20P 225. Bids range from $2,126,253,000 to $2,521,401,000. The Metropolitan Council underutilized business MCUB goal for this contract was 3%. 3 of the 4 bids were determined to be non-responsive, and we did have one sole responsible bidder that was 14% higher than the lowest bid. The Environmental Committee approved rejection of all bids at the April 27th meeting, 2021. The meeting followed by the Metropolitan Council authorization at the May 12th, 2021 meeting. MCS is requesting to extend the existing contract so that the details can be worked out for a revised scope and work, scope of work, and to allow adequate time for rebid process as in the previous contract. The rationale is the amendment of this mechanical pipe fitting services contract exceeds the 10%, which requires council approval. And same, the Thrive lens analysis, this action furthers the Thrive outcome of stewardship, prosperity and equity by MCS Maintenance Business Unit partnering and working with procurement and OEO to develop a plan and scope of work for our bidding contractors to be successful in the bid process. This creates regional economic competitiveness, thereby attracting and retaining successful businesses from our neighboring communities. And funding will also be the same through the annual operating budgets from all MCS locations requiring services. And there's no known opposition. And I do want to reach out to committee member Zern. You put me in contact with Gary Thaden, and he's a real good guy. I liked him. We had some good conversation, but it was he didn't really have a lot of information to help in this process. But we are going to continue to stay in contact, bounce ideas off each other. So I'd like to thank you for putting me in contact with him.
You're a little bit garbled, but I think you said you're welcome. Great, thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve this staff recommendation? I believe that was Councilmember Zirin making a motion. Is there a second?
True.
I'm sorry. I feel I need to mention I skipped my proposed action, which is fairly important here. That the Metropolitan Council authorize its regional administrator to execute a contract amendment with Corval Constructors for an amount not to exceed 1.4 million for the additional mechanical pipe fitting services for all MCS locations. That would extend this contract out long enough. I figure through October, which should give us enough time to come up with our plan for moving forward with meeting the MCUB goals and objectives, working with procurement and OEO.
Great, thanks for making that clarification. I think we heard, we have a motion from Zirin. I don't think we actually got a second. Councilmember Sterner, would you like to make that second?
Yes, Chair, I can second that motion.
Appreciate it. Let's get a roll call.
Fredson,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to our one and only information item. It's a good one. 2050 Water Resources Policy Plan Update. Welcome back,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sventek.
Mr. Chair and committee members, Kyle Colvin and I will be here today to talk to you about the 2050 Water Resources Policy Plan Update. This we've heard all of your conversations that you've had at the Committee of the Whole to discuss the update of the Regional Development Guide, the key approaches and issues that you're recommending. We've been listening to all of that, so that we're taking that into consideration as we're starting this process as well. But today we want to focus on really the 2050 plan itself. So we're going to start off with the history of the current 2040 plan, and then kind of go over the main content changes of that plan, go over a high-level process and timeline for the 2050 plan, and get your input on some new issues that we've been hearing about. So what we're trying to do differently this time around is, in the past, we've kind of written the draft policy, written the draft implementation strategies, gone out and got input on that at that point and made changes and based on those comments, and then taken the full plan out for public review and hearing. This time around, we're trying to start our input process now. So we're starting with like new issues that we need to look at. So we'll be talking about that as well today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to kind of kick off basically the background and the history, and then Kyle will take over when we're going to talk about the new things for the 2050 plan. So just to ground everybody, the Minnesota Statute Chapter 473 requires the council to prepare this comprehensive development guide for the region, which includes the system plans for transportation, which includes the aviation plan, the regional parks, and the wastewater system, as well as it includes different planning policies areas, which I'll show on the next slide, please. So this is a better picture to kind of show how the plans interrelate. There's the regional development guide, and then there's a land use plan, a housing plan, which are policy plans. Then there's the three system plans: parks, transportation, and water. The water plan is made up of policy for surface water management, water supply, as well as wastewater, and the wastewater system plan. Next slide, please. So this next slide is a graphic that kind of shows you about the 10-year planning cycle used to develop the plan updates. So basically all this work started in 2010 with the census. The census was provided us with information to update our forecast for population, employment, and housing. That information was then used to do new sewer forecasts and projections, as well as new water supply demand projections and other elements of the updated plans. So after we got that information from the census, we started work on the Regional Development Guide, or at that time, Thrive MSP 2040. So that happened in 2013 and 14. Towards the end of 2014 and into 2015, we started really the work on the system plans, which really, as I mentioned, are the transportation, wastewater system, and the park system plans. And then by the end of 2015, all the plans had been adopted. So once the plans were adopted, that allowed us to prepare these system statements that are prepared for all the communities. Basically, they provide direction to the communities on how to prepare their comprehensive plans, the new changes to the plans that are needed, and elements they need for their comprehensive sewer plan, their local surface water management plan, and their local water supply plan, as well as all the other elements in those comprehensive plans. Those system statements have to be done and sent out 3 years prior to when the plans are due, so it gives the communities 3 years to prepare their plans. There's a lot that goes on in those 3 years. There was many trainings that we had. We updated the local planning handbook, which provided guidance and direction to communities as well on how to update their plan, give them specific resources to use for information to include in the plan as well. We had webinars, webcasts, podcasts, monthly mailings with providing information to communities just to help them out through this process. End goal was all that all comp plans would be submitted by December 31st, 2018. And then that kicks off, after those plans are submitted and reviewed by the council, kicks off the time for implementation of those plans. Then the whole cycle starts over when in 2020 we have the next census. Next slide, please. Just kind of taking a step back and kind of going into a little bit more detail. Thrive MSP 2040 was, the overall regional development guide. It included chapters of the housing plan, the parks plan, transportation, and the water resources policy plan. Next slide, please. And we took from Thrive MSP the regional outcomes of stewardship, prosperity, equity, livability, and sustainability. We used those outcomes in developing and framing the policy and the implementation strategies that we developed for the water resources policy plan. We focused heavily on providing sustainable water resources. All of that work really included looking at getting adequate quality and availability of water supply and drinking water, as well as adequate water quality and quantity for recreation, fish and wildlife habitat, and quality of life for the region. We then developed strategies to help measure where we were at with meeting the sustainable water resources goal and meeting our livability and prosperity goals. And that really included our work in assessing and measuring the quality of the region's lakes, rivers, and streams, as well as our work in protecting the region's water resources through our work on stormwater management, promoting conservation and reuse, and really on our high level of service for wastewater treatment. Next slide, please. The main driver of the water resources policy plan at that time was really the sustainability direction we got from Thrive. The sustainability direction was really that we were planning for water resources that would be sustainable, supported by this regional strategy that really balances growth and protection. So, we know we have to plan for the economic and growth of the region, but we also want to do that in ways that will protect, maintain, improve the quality and quantity of our waters in the region. Next slide, please. I'm not going to talk about all the policy areas in the water policy plan because there's a lot of areas that are just minor tweaks and carried forward into the new plan, but there were some kind of newer areas, so I was going to emphasize some of those today. The 2040 plan was really developed around providing adequate and high quality ground and surface water supplies, maintaining and improving the water quality of our region's lakes, rivers, streams, wetlands, focusing more on what more we could do for the monitoring and assessment of those lakes, rivers, and streams. It also included this policy on operational sustainability that was focusing more on reducing our energy use, reducing and controlling our air pollutant emissions, reducing, reusing, and recycling at our wastewater treatment plant facilities. Next slide, please. And I know this is a super high level, quick look at the 2040 plan, but I just wanted to give you some background before we jump into where we're going with the 2050 plan. So this plan also focused on surface water planning and management, and it really focused on the watershed management approach, where we have 33 watershed management organizations in the region. We have all the communities are required to do local surface water management plans. So we're not inventing a new structure. We're using the current structure to figure out how to manage our resources, protect those resources, do things to promote protection, reduce flooding, protect water quality, using the setup that we have for the region, working with state agencies as well as the many watershed partners. It was all about maximizing regional costs and benefits so that we would balance the work we did in non-point source pollution and point source costs to balance those costs to kind of use the biggest bang for the buck projects to help protect and restore the region's water resources. And then wastewater planning and wastewater services, obviously a lot of key things in there, but what I'm highlighting today is it's really continuing the planning for the region for growth. So making sure that where growth is expected or where the communities are planning growth, that we can adequately serve them with the sewer system, or if not, that we adequately have policies in place to make sure that they're treating their wastewater, with SSTS or subsurface sewage treatment systems or communal systems as well. And kind of a newer area in this plan was focusing on water conservation and reuse. We actually amended the plan in 2018 to actually provide more direction on the wastewater reuse piece of it. And then continuing our efforts that have been going on for several years, and many, many years, actually about the last 2 planning cycles, about inflow and infiltration. So it was really about getting further direction, requiring mitigation plans of communities, further direction on how we can continue to minimize and reduce that I&I. Next slide, please. And then also there was, policies related to water supply, and the water supply and tying it to the master water supply plan. So it was about planning for and supporting sustainable uses of water resources, providing technical assessments for the region, and providing cost-effective investments in multi-community projects related to water supply infrastructure, which you've seen some of those over the last few years where we've done studies to help benefit the Northwest, for instance, area to help them investigate their water supply issues in that area, and so things like that. This plan was really a plan about integrating all the water areas. So looking at what we do in water supply, what we do in water resources and surface water management, what we do in wastewater planning, and how they all work together and how one area can impact or work with the other area. It was more about tying that more closely together. In the previous plan, we had specific separate sections. One dealt with water supply, one with water resources, one with wastewater. This was really about finding those interconnections and tying that together more. And one area that really showed up is reuse, where we have reuse is, we were looking at wastewater reuse, we look at stormwater reuse, and all those avenues for different types of reuse to help promote protection of our water resources and reduce demand on the water supplies. And then finally, it was really expanded our efforts with this greater collaboration. Like I said, we did a lot of public input meetings and stakeholder meetings kind of toward more of the end of the process, but it was really beginning our efforts of this greater collaboration, helping develop this plan from with our partners in mind and with their support. And it was also making sure that we had enough in this plan to allow us to provide financial support and technical support so that the implementers of different policy plans, or like the local surface water plan or the water supply plan, would have this financial and technical support to help them implement their plans and make things happen at that local level. Next slide, please. And I'll be turning over to Kyle now for the next slides.
Thank you, Judy. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Environment Committee. As Judy indicated, I will be going through the planning cycle for the 2050 plans. Just a quick reminder that how the 10-year comprehensive planning cycle works. You'll note that the process here in this slide is very similar to the cycle and the slide that Judy presented for the 2040 planning cycle. However, this slide here includes the updated milestone dates that are reflective for the activities that the council will be going through here in the upcoming decade. The 2050 planning process starts with the 2020 census, and the information collected through that guides new community growth forecasts that the community assigns to the communities in the 7-county area. Due to the pandemic, the 2020 census results will be delayed slightly. However, the delay shouldn't be significant enough to alter the schedule shown here for the development of the Regional Development Guide and the policy plans. Starting now through 2024, we will begin work on the new Regional Development Guide. Also during the same time, we'll be working on the new policy plans and system plans that make up the Regional Development Guide. The Water Resources Policy Plan will include water resource policies in the areas of water supply, surface water, and wastewater. Also included in the Water Resource Policy Plan will be the Wastewater System Plan, which I will cover a little bit later. There are also system plans, as Judy indicated, for transportation, which includes aviation and parks, as well as policy plans for parks, transportation, land use, and housing. System plans direct how we operate and provide service through our forest systems, and the local community comprehensive plans must comply with these system plans and the policies in their plans to be approved or authorized by the council. Starting in 2024 and continuing in 2025, the Regional Development Guide and all of the policy plans will be adopted by the council. In 2025, new system statements will be issued to communities, which includes guidance for communities in developing their comprehensive plans. This kicks off the local planning efforts in those communities. Starting in 2025 and continuing into 2026, a new local planning handbook will be completed and will be a resource for communities working on revising or updating their comprehensive plans, all of which are due by December 31st of 2028. The council reviews local plan updates and allows them to put them into effect. It formally approves the wastewater plan. After the approval, the communities can then start implementing those plans. Next slide. I'll go over quickly what the Water Resource Policy Plan is, since we've covered parts of it already. The Water Resource Policy Plan is the guiding document for the work we do at the council as it relates to our role in water, and for the communities in the region as they develop their comp plans. And it establishes the expectations for local communities in the areas of water supply, surface water planning, and regional wastewater service. It is a chapter of the Regional Development Guide, and as you all know, that is currently called Thrive MSP 2040. It also includes the Wastewater System Plan. The information in these plans guides our work as well as directs communities and in what needs to be included in their local surface water plan, comprehensive sewer plan, and local water supply plan. Next slide. As I mentioned, included in the Water Resource Policy Plan is the Wastewater System Plan. It includes a graphic representation of the 10-year land supply for regional wastewater development and redevelopment, as portrayed as a service area out to 2050. It also includes a post-2050 long-term service area. The long-term service area should be considered as illustrative, as it's based on the treatment capacities at our 9 wastewater treatment facilities. A summary of regional assets is also included in the system plan. It includes assets for our wastewater treatment plants and our interceptor conveyance system. The plan also includes existing and future regional treatment capacities and identifies large system capacity projects in the interceptor system, including capacity extensions for new communities and capacity enhancements for existing communities. It also includes regional wastewater treatment plant, a list of regional wastewater treatment plant acquisitions and regional service extensions to new communities or new areas of existing communities that are served. It includes forecast sewer population growth, households and employment growth, and associated wastewater flow projections by regional treatment facility and each individual community served by the regional wastewater system. And it identifies high-level strategies to address potential emerging regulatory requirements. Next slide. Starting last year, staff have been identifying potential new policy areas from conversations during the 2040 comprehensive planning process and other internal discussions, and have identified a few possible issues where new policy development or revisions to existing policies suggest further review and discussion. The next two slides list topics we have heard and suggested should be looked into and potentially included as new or revisited policy areas. Under the category of land use and rural policy, an issue came up or a questioning came up regarding the cost of service for wastewater in rural areas that rely on subsurface treatment systems or septic systems. The question being posed is the high cost of new or replacement of these systems putting added pressure to provide regional service prematurely? Another question or issue that was raised related to communities that are having challenges with wastewater treatment in rural areas due to regulatory requirements and the costs associated for necessary upgrades. Does this incentivize communities to request regional wastewater services sooner than what the natural progression of outward urbanization would normally make these services available? Also, the implications for private wells in rural areas related to the quality and quantity of water supply was another issue that was identified. Land use policies in rural areas related to protecting land at densities that preserves areas for future development, and those that have developed at densities too high for continued reliance on SSTs, yet too low for future urbanization and regional service to be provided cost effectively was another issue. Regarding wastewater system issues, one that was brought up was our current existing reconveyance policies, which is a policy in which facilities that are no longer identified as serving a regional purpose, should these facilities be reconveyed to local communities. It was suggested that we should revisit this existing policy that essentially commits the council to repair and reconvey facilities based solely on a facility no longer serving a regional purpose. Should there be other considerations? Private property I&I mitigation funding options was another issue that was raised. And also vector waste and liquid waste receiving facilities. Should this be a regional service with multiple locations made available in the regional wastewater service area? That was a question that was brought up. Continuing on the next slide. Other issues concern the contaminants of emerging concerns. Chlorides, PFAS, nitrates, and other contaminants were also raised. How should the plan address these issues? Source water protection and the vulnerability of water supply sources. Water quality as it relates to drinking water, aquatic life, and recreational use of surface waters. The availability of water, the use and access to surface water came up. Should there be renewed policies in these areas? Today, we are looking for your input on whether these issues make sense to investigate further and to solicit input on potentially new policies or concerns that should be addressed in the 2050 Water Resources Policy Plan. Next slide. So in 2020, we started getting informal input on key issues that could be considered for investigation and potentially inclusion in the next plan. And we will continue identifying other issues throughout this year. Later this year, we plan to have a more formal process to get input on these key issues. After we settle and identify on the key issues that should be addressed, we plan to conduct studies and evaluations and will aid in the development of white papers or technical memorandums as needed to help frame these issues. This would include potential policy changes or new policies and implementation strategies to include in the plan. We will get input from stakeholders on issue papers in 2022 and 2023. Then we will begin drafting new policies and strategies and present this through informational series, through a series of workshops, including both here in the Environment Committee and other stakeholders for input on the draft policies and strategies. We will then draft a full plan and get input on that in 2024. Late in 2024 and early 2025, we will start the formal public input process, hold public meetings, which will culminate in a public hearing and final adoption of the plan, hopefully in May 2025. At that point, system statements will be drafted and sent out to communities by the end of 2025. This will start the 3-year timeframe for communities to update their comp plans with a formal submission deadline, as I mentioned early, of December 31st, 2028. That concludes my summary of the 2050 planning process. I'll now turn it over to Judy to wrap up. Next slide. Thanks.
Thanks. So I know that's a lot of information in a short period of time. This is just the start of this conversation. We're just today kind of like grounding everyone in the current plan, where we are anticipating to go with the new plan, how we're trying to kind of beef up the whole process with more input earlier on from our partners, from you, from stakeholders, and just getting that additional more time for input now so that we can develop a more, I guess, a plan that we feel is more representative of the region, or it has more greater input from the region, so that we can get that adopted in 2025. So there's a couple things we wanted to know or hear from you today. First, if you have any questions about anything we said, questions about this process we're proposing or the schedule. We gave you a super high level schedule with end date of somewhere mid 2025. We intend to come back to the Environment Committee many times along the way. We didn't define that all today, but we are happy to come back and share that with you in the future. We also are looking to hear if of the issues we talked about, which are very specific to the water area, and which also will include looking at the issues you've been talking about with Thrive, or the Regional Development Guide work as well. But did we miss anything that you've heard, that you know of, that we need to think of, that we need to maybe kind of dig a little deeper into, so we can develop more, maybe a white paper to figure out if we need more, or a tech memo to help us develop and kind of push forward new policies or strategies in that area? If and this is not the end of that conversation. If you think of things, we can come back later and talk about that too. So it's really questions from you today, questions about the process, questions about the schedule, any initial thoughts on issues that we're missing that we need to think about before we kind of take the time later this year to kind of set up some more formal meetings with our partners to get input, which of course we would bring that input back to you, get your look and your answers and your questions about that and as well. So I guess with that, I'll stop and ask if you have any questions or anything else you would like to know from Kyle or I today. Thanks.
Kyle and Judy, super helpful. Great presentation. Thank you. I'm sure we have some questions or thoughts. I have one just right off the top of my head. When you say, first of all, I love the idea of starting with that input sooner rather than later. And when you say like connecting with our stakeholders, clearly that's cities or water management, kind of governmental agencies. Does it extend beyond that? Are we checking in or connecting with at this level with Sierra Club or Nature Conservancy or Friends of the Mississippi River, you know, those sorts of groups or other groups?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, committee members. I was going to say that I apparently did not. Was that, you know, yes, we'll be planning on focusing on watershed organizations, our partners who are basically our customers, cities and communities for sure. And we want to spend time with, you know, the rural communities and the urban core, all the communities, get input on that. But it does also include a process in which we're still working on defining the entire process for getting input from the nonprofits, the citizens of the region, and some of that may be done by some kind of survey or online ability to kind of like go to a website and provide input there. Those are the things we're still working out, but great question. And also your thoughts on, are there groups that I didn't mention just now that you want to make sure that we go out and talk to? Because, you know, any direction on people that we want to make sure that we get on our list would be great too.
At least to get them thinking about it early on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Councilmember Sterner.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just my question would be like groups. I know, like being on the Clean Water Council as a representative, you know, we identify emerging contaminants, and we, you know, look like in the presentation you had 4 of them, but I'm kind of wondering about other ones to be aligned with, like the microplastics, for example, or some of the other ones we're looking at. And then with the Clean Water Council, of course, we've got a lot of stakeholders on there, from the Department of Ag to, you know, fishing groups, et cetera. And I think that'd be a great one to check in with to see which ones are on the radar, just stay up on the presentation when, and what are, you know, mandated now may be different in 3 years when we're getting ready to do the presentation, but that would be my comments.
I think Mr. Chair and committee member, yeah, great point. You notice we had the word other, which was meant to cover. So the ones we've heard so far from people are chlorides is a really big issue, which is, and nitrates. And nitrates is not so much of an emerging thing. It's still something that's been going on for a while, as well as PFAS, which is more of an emerging thing. So we know there's microplastic, micro beads, and other contaminants as well. So yes, they're on our list, but though we were just sharing a subset of them with you today.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate your work.
Councilmember Vento.
I don't mean to sound like Susan Doomsday here, but I'm wondering if we also, Mr. Chair and Judy and Kyle, should perhaps think about the issue of cybersecurity as it relates to it. I know that we've had a lot of reports about the special efforts that are being made at our sites to make sure that our work is secure. But we might also want to have those conversations with cities and townships, counties, as it relates to their work, because a lot of times we could be on the receiving end of things that are the result of security problems at other levels. So just a thought, and again, I don't mean to be doomsday, but it's certainly a big part of the news.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all of those things that you brought up as emerging issues really struck a chord for me. I always think about water use reduction and the various ways that we can promote that. And I recall that we just installed, I think it's like a 40,000 square foot or 40,000 gallon cistern at the new bus garage in North Minneapolis, and examples like that are top of mind for me, and how each one of us uses something like 100 gallons a day. So I think you're on the right track. Any other comments? In terms of planning, I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? This is gonna be a central part of this committee in the next few years.
Yes, Mr. Chair, committee members, we will be able to schedule out for you of how we intend to bring things back throughout the private, really the next 3-4 years on this topic. So it will be a central part of this committee, and there will be a lot of opportunity to provide input along the way, and or you let us know if we're missing something too, so that we can make sure that we build the opportunity for that as well. And I was going to make a point. I just want to reiterate the emerging issues we are looking into more than what we had on our list, but also we're getting input from the Metro Area Water Supply Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, on the water supply issues, and the master water supply plan is being updated at the same time. That will feed into policies that go into the policy plan as well. So definitely water use and conservation are all factors that we're thinking of as well.
And I'll just also say that being very explicit around climate adaptation and mitigation, but adaptation with a world that is warmer and wetter. Just being very explicit, really calling it out.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Like I said, we're tracking and working closely with the others on the regional development guide update, which climate change and those issues are key there, and we know that we will have to factor that in, and we'll have to call it out for sure, as well as the other issues that you've been talking about. So thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments? Well, great job. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. That takes us to the general manager's report. Lisa.
Good afternoon. I just have a couple things I wanted to share on the wastewater and COVID testing we've been doing. So if you think back when we first got into the pandemic, we were participating in a project that we had dropped out of, but they're going into phase 2. And so today we started participating in it. Again, it's a Health and Human Services and CDC wastewater surveillance project. And originally when we participated, it was just Metro. This time it'll be Metro, Blue Lake, Seneca, and Empire. And so they're, finding that there's interest in being able to track the variants. And so I think that'll be an interesting one for us to participate in. And they've got more funding now. So, the reason we dropped out of that earlier one was the cost kept going up and we weren't really sure where they were going to go with it. So we focused in on the studies that we were involved with in Minnesota. So we've been doing the project work with the genomics lab at the U. And now staff will come back and give you a little bit more detail, but I will say that the variants, we're having good success in being able to distinguish what variants are spiking and what percentage of the cases are the different variants is lining up really well. So we are actually having conversations, or staff are talking with Minnesota Department of Health about the possibilities of how this might be of interest to them and looking at possible future ways of applying it. So we're excited that we were able to collect correlating information that looks like it holds value, and we'll see where that takes us.
I always think that can be a more accurate representation of the virus in the community, because not everybody shows up at the hospital, and probably not everybody gets tested. So, but that would or will show up in the wastewater.
That's right. That's right. And probably the number of people that are don't have symptoms, they're not even going to think of getting tested, but they would shed these RNA particles in the wastewater, just like somebody who was symptomatic. So from that standpoint, I guess you could say it's unbiased.
Very true.
So
Questions on
that's
that?
all I had tonight, other than stay cool, I guess, right? The weather is something we can blame a lot on in Minnesota.
Indeed. Well, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you all.